Universitas saat ini telah bertransformasi menembus batas dinding ruang kelas karena pendidikan tinggi sudah memasuki era baru. Universitas juga memainkan peran penting sebagai agen perubahan publik secara luas melalui sosialisasi dan penelitian berkualitas melalui kabar kampus. Oleh karena itu, ini saatnya para dosen menampilkan kompetensi serta hasil riset melalui berbagai cara diseminasi. Bersama Klinik Hukum dan Instagram Live Hukum Online, para dosen mendapatkan ruang berbagi perspektif kepada komunitas hukum terbesar di Indonesia. Untuk kebutuhan aktivitas perkuliahan, Premium Stories hadir dengan insight tentang isu-isu hukum terkini. Tak berhenti sampai di situ, Sivitas Akademika Kampus Mitra University Solutions mendapatkan akses untuk mengikuti kelas penulisan jurnal. Para mentor berpengalaman akan memberikan bimbingan tahap demi tahap, mulai dari proses penulisan hingga publikasi. Kemudian, untuk menunjang semua kebutuhan riset, Hukum Online pun menghadirkan akses bagi Sivitas Akademika untuk menjelajahi pusat data kami. Temukan ratusan ribu peraturan, mulai dari tingkat pusat, daerah, hingga surat edaran. Melalui setiap fitur dan aktivitas bersama University Solutions, universitas mampu memaksimalkan pencapaian tridharma perguruan tinggi dan meraih akreditasi unggul. Sudah saatnya kampus Anda bergabung bersama University Solutions dari Hukum Online. Universitas saat ini telah bertransformasi menembus batas dinding ruang kelas karena pendidikan tinggi sudah memasuki era baru. Universitas juga memainkan peran penting sebagai agen perubahan publik secara luas melalui sosialisasi dan penelitian berkualitas melalui kabar kampus. Oleh karena itu, ini saatnya para dosen menampilkan kompetensi serta hasil riset melalui berbagai cara diseminasi. Bersama Klinik Hukum dan Instagram Live Hukum Online, para dosen mendapatkan ruang berbagi perspektif kepada komunitas hukum terbesar di Indonesia. Untuk kebutuhan aktivitas perkuliahan, Premium Stories hadir dengan insight tentang isu-isu hukum terkini. Tak berhenti sampai di situ, Sivitas Akademika Kampus Mitra University Solutions mendapatkan akses untuk mengikuti kelas penulisan jurnal. Para mentor berpengalaman akan memberikan bimbingan tahap demi tahap, mulai dari proses penulisan hingga publikasi. Kemudian, untuk menunjang semua kebutuhan riset, Hukum Online pun menghadirkan akses bagi Sivitas Akademika untuk menjelajahi pusat data kami. Temukan ratusan ribu peraturan, mulai dari tingkat pusat, daerah, hingga surat edaran. Melalui setiap fitur dan aktivitas bersama University Solutions, Universitas mampu memaksimalkan pencapaian Tridharma perguruan tinggi dan meraih akreditasi unggul. Sudah saatnya kampus Anda bergabung bersama University Solutions dari Hukum Online.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I kindly request your attention as we prepare to commence our session. I extend a gracious welcome to each and every one of you and trust that you are comfortably seated. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, presenters, esteemed guests. May I kindly request your attention as we prepare to commence our session. Welcome to the International Conference on Regulating Technology in Asia, Prospects and Challenges 2024, an economic research institute for the ASEAN and East Asia, UPH's special event on local content requirements. My name is Julia Loreli Wijaya, and it is my pleasure to be your host for this event. On behalf of UPH, AREA, Chiang Mai University, and Monash University, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for taking the time to join us today. Before proceeding further, we wish to express our sincere gratitude to our sponsors for their valuable support in fostering the success of the ICRTA and AREA UPH special event, namely, Badan Arbitrase Nasional Indonesia, or known as BANI, as our gold sponsor. Hukum Online as our media partner, Dr. Stephanie Hartanto and Insinyur Boy Robianto as our personal donators. Ladies and gentlemen, as we commence this conference, I kindly invite you to rise in a gesture of respect for the national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. As our welcome gesture to you, we would like to present a traditional dance presented by our very own students. Please welcome UPH Law students. honorable guests, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, the inauguration of the ICRTA shall commence with an opening prayer delivered by Professor Udin Silalahi. Please welcome Professor Udin Silalahi.
Very good morning to all speakers, presenters. Welcome to UPH and all participants. So before we start our conference, I will lead prayer in Christian faith to those who has another faith. So please pray with us according to your faith. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us the opportunity to gather here today to attend this international conference on regulating technology, prospects, and challenges. Thank you for protecting us as we travel and providing an opportunity to meet, learn, discuss, and grow. As we begin our conference, we dedicate this time to you. We pray for the invited speakers, presenters, participants, and the committee who made this conference possible. Your word says in Colossians 3, verse 17, "And whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to the God, the Father, through him." Thank you for blessing our time together. Help us make new connection, discussion on regulating technology, and gain knowledge and wisdom to do the work you have set before us. We give you honor and glory, Lord. We ask this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you to Professor Udin Silalahi. To formally initiate the proceedings of our event this morning, I take great pleasure in extending an invitation to UPH's Rector, Dr. Jonathan L. Parapak, to deliver his inaugural remarks of welcome. I kindly request Dr. Parapak to come up on stage.
Distinguished guests, honorable guests, and all conference participants, welcome to UPH. Welcome to Indonesia. Yeah, for friends from Thailand, from Australia, and maybe from other ASEAN countries. It's indeed a very special occasion for us to welcome you all to this very special conference. I'd like to thank the committee for organizing this conference, and I wish all the participants a very fruitful and very in-depth discussion on the topic. The topic of this conference, to me, is very near because my life has been very much related to the information technology. So I've gone through the challenges, not only in the development of technology, but actually in also regulating technology. I had the privilege of being part of the team to transform the law of telecommunication and information technology in Indonesia. That's about 40 years ago. Yeah, we never anticipated that the world or Indonesia will be going through this really unpredictable telecommunication and information technology development. So that's why I welcome this conference and hope that the wisdom of this conference, the ideas that will be discussed, will be ushering us to the future world of, let me say, unpredictable technology. So I hope you lawyers will be able to really look at the future and say, okay, what is ahead of us? Nobody knows. And I think with the development of technology lately, especially in relation to the artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and everything, yes, definitely, we are still going through technological revolution. So indeed, it's a privilege to welcome you all, the distinguished speakers, to UPH, to the Faculty of Law's conference. We will have the Vice Minister of Trade of Indonesia, Dr. Jerry Sambuaga, who will be joining us a bit later on. We also have a special welcome to Dr. Lily Yan Ing, the lead advisor of area. Also, later on, I have not seen him, we will welcome Dr. John Riadi, who is the CEO of the LIPO Group. As you know, LIPO Group has been involved also in technological development, internet, and other telecommunication area. We also welcome Eunice Hong, Head of Artificial Intelligence, and many other development. Christopher Marsden, the professor of, and I heard that he worked in telecommunication before. We also did, as I was sharing with him, I was chairman of the board of Intelsat and nearly also in the Inmarsat in England. And I participated in building some of the major telecommunication in Australia. For example, the microwave from Melbourne to Perth. I participated in that. So, yes, the landscape of telecommunication information technology has changed considerably. And that's why I think we are also privileged to welcome Dr. Nutamon Kong Harun, Dean of Faculty of Law from the Chiang Mai University. It's a beautiful place. We have many international telecommunication conference in Chiang Mai, which I attended. So it is really a privilege to welcome you here. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege for Universitas Pelita Harapan, and I'm proud to say we have a young dean, Dr. Feliana, who is right there at the moment, to welcome you all. And I hope that this conference will be blessed by the Lord, and certainly not only we enjoy the very special dance put on by the students of law, but I hope today is a very fruitful day for the conference, and I look forward to the wisdom from this conference as we look forward to this unpredictable world and technology. And if you can do it in the legal aspect, that will be a special contribution to our society and also to the arrangement of the technological development. So, on behalf again of Universitas Pelita Harapan, I welcome you all. I thank you all the participants, for this very special conference, and may our good Lord will bless this conference for His glory. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pak Rector, for the heartfelt remarks. Now, presenting the opening remarks on behalf of the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia is Dr. Lily Yang Ing. Unfortunately, Dr. Lily is unable to join us on site for this event. However, she has thoughtfully prepared a video presentation for our audience. Let us now watch the video together.
Bapak Jerry Sambuaga, Vice Minister of Trade of Indonesia, Bapak Jonathan Parapa, Rector of University of Pelita Harapan Indonesia, distinguished speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen, our beloved students, a very good morning to all of you. I wish I could be there with you today. I really hope that today you're gonna have a very fruitful conference. I just want to share with you two simple observations. Lately, there are two issues that are majorly affecting trade and investments at the global level. First is the developments of digital technologies and AI. As we know, it took only 2 months for ChatGPT to get 100 million users, and now ChatGPT has 1.8 billion visitors every month. WeChat has 1.3 billion, that is about 95% of Chinese populations. In South Korea, the ratio of robots to humans is 1 to 10. That's how massive and how fast the growth of digital technologies, automations, and robots in our generations. That's gonna change not only the way we work, but also the way we live. The second observation is on the rising protectionist measures that's gonna affect trade and investments at the global level. Just in 2022, there were about 2,800 protectionist measures across investments, trade in goods, and trade in services. The protectionist measures, it includes local content requirements, exports and import bans, non-automatic exports and import licensings, and many other measures behind the reasons of national security. These kinds of rising geopolitical tensions, which result in rising protectionist measures, is really hinder the potentials of trade and investments at the global levels, as well as at the regional and national levels. So I think today's conference really highlight those two important issues, and I trust that today's conference will gonna provide insights in managing the developments of digital technologies and robots and AI, as well as mitigating negative impacts of the rising protectionist measures in the world. So I wish you a very fruitful conference, and I hope that I can join you in person next year. All the best. Thank you. Bapak Jerry Sambu.
At this moment, we shall transition to the subsequent segment of this event, our first plenary session. Taking the chair of this plenary session is Ms. Jessica Los Banos. Ms. Jessica, a lecturer in the English program at UPH, possesses expertise in the fields of international law and business law. Her profound knowledge and extensive experience makes her a valuable asset not only within the academic realm, but also as a coach for international competitions. Ms. Jessica's guidance extends to participants in prestigious events such as JESUP, Asia Cup, Hong Kong Red Cross International Humanitarian Law Moot, or known as the IHL, FDI, and the ELSA Moot Court, or known as the WTO. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Ms. Jessica.
Ladies and gentlemen, conference participants, our guests, and students, good morning. On behalf of our conference partners, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia area, Monash University, Chiang Mai University, we would like to welcome you to this first plenary panel on regulating AI in Asia. So we are very, very grateful to have 3 experts on artificial intelligence who will join us in the panel this morning. So first is Eunice Wang from Google. Second is Professor Chris Marsden from Monash University, who is a professor of AI. And then later in a while, he will arrive at around 9 o'clock because of last-minute changes in his schedule. We will welcome John Riady, who is CEO of the Lipo Group of Companies. It is indeed my privilege to actually serve as your moderator this morning. I would like to request now Eunice and Chris to actually join me on stage. So let's all give them a warm round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, while AI has been researched and used in a large number of applications for almost 50 years, such as in online shopping that we do every day and in Google search engines, recent advances in generative and self-modifying AI with really very deep neural networks that mimic the brain and how humans think have significantly accelerated its capabilities, leading to unprecedented breakthroughs in natural language processing and machine learning algorithms that is actually transforming societies around the world. But not only is it disrupting and transforming societies, but it also is posing dangers and risks from misuse of content, as well as, for example, deep fakes and to misinformation. So in Asia, regulation and governance has actually been diverse, with countries like Singapore, Australia, Korea, and Japan being very early adopters, and therefore they have very robust, strong governance frameworks, while the rest of the region, including the Philippines, have really been struggling to actually develop their own and yet to craft their own legal regimes. So this conference is our contribution to the debates and discussions on how AI should be regulated in Asia. And so in this panel, we will hear our speakers discuss first AI and its potential in business. We will also hear from Eunice on AI opportunities in the ASEAN, and Chris will then speak about lessons from internet regulation and also prospects for regulation in Asia. So our forum will proceed as follows. Our speakers will have 10 minutes to present their plenary speeches, after which we will then have a really very brief discussion, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. So I hope you will answer and ask questions to our experts. This is a really very rare opportunity for them to be here. So may I now request Eunice Wang to be our first speaker. So let me introduce Eunice first. Eunice is head of AI and emerging technology policy for Asia Pacific of the platform giant Google. Prior to her current role, Eunice led trade policy of Google in Asia and Google's engagement also with the World Trade Organization. In fact, she also was a political secretary at the Singapore Embassy in Jakarta, and she also served as permanent representative in the Singapore mission to the WTO and WIPO. So Eunice is a graduate of the University of Michigan and Oxford University. Let's all give a warm applause to Eunice.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you so much, UPH, for the invitation to be here. It's really great to see so many of you and so many young faces. I usually deal with regulators who are not so young, so very good to be here today. I thought, I know the topic of today's panel plenary discussion is on regulating AI, but I thought maybe to give a little bit of framing and context of AI. Why is it so important to regulate? And I think it's really important to regulate because we have to get it right. AI is a super powerful technology. We have never really, even at Google, we've never seen anything quite like this before. The pace of development of AI in recent days, you can see what was mentioned just now about ChatGPT, what Google has just put on the market in terms of Gemini. The capabilities that these technologies have are really astounding, to many people. And so it's so important to get right, and it's so important as we think about regulation to think about what exactly we're regulating and what the trade-offs are, right? Because there's always trade-offs between innovation and sort of mitigating risk. So today I wanted to just show you a couple of examples from a recent paper that we published called an AI Opportunity Agenda for ASEAN. And I really wanted to show you the use cases of AI that are applied in ASEAN today, and the potential for AI to do so much more. So if we could go on to the next slide, this one, sort of really AI having the potential to revolutionize every sector in ASEAN, right? I'll show you some examples later. But more importantly, to address some of humanity's greatest challenges. Next slide, please. Okay, the text is a little bit small, but we have this really cool project called Flood Hub. Just Google it, Flood Hub. And this is something that we have deployed in over 80 countries in the world. What this really does is that it helps to address one of the most common challenges, including in our region. So flooding is the most common natural disaster event in ASEAN. It happens to many communities, the most vulnerable ones in the countries in the Mekong Delta region, right? So every year you read news reports of massive damage in Cambodia or Laos or Vietnam or Thailand due to flooding, right? 13% of ASEAN's population is affected by flooding every year. So you can see, what a great challenge it is for this region. Next slide, please. And it's not just ASEAN, right? Globally, 250 million people affected every year by floods, $10 billion in terms of economic damage that is caused by floods. Next slide. So we have this really cool thing called Flood Hub. It uses two combined AI models to forecast floods. So it's able to forecast up and give warnings up to 7 days in advance. So, if a flood incident is likely to happen, the AI model is able to tell based on the water level and sort of data that we have to say that, okay, likely flood event in 7 days, please prepare to evacuate. Please, make emergency response measures. And these are available to everyone for free. We have linked up with government agencies, natural disaster response teams to equip them with this kind of this application, right? To help them help people, essentially. Next slide. So this Flood Hub thing covers 80 countries worldwide, and within ASEAN, it's available primarily first in the Mekong Delta countries, and then we're expanding this to more countries around the world. Next slide. This one, traffic. Yesterday I came, hi John, I came from Jakarta to Karawaci. It took about 2.5 hours, so I was like, okay, we do need to deploy this in more cities around the world, right? So you are all familiar with traffic issues in ASEAN. So next slide. We have a really cool thing. So basically a lot of countries, when they try to solve traffic problems, they try to deploy very expensive sensors, or they have to have actual people there, doing manual vehicle counts, right? And what we found is that actually when cars stop at traffic lights, the amount of emissions that it gives out is 29 times more than if it was on an open road. Next slide, please. So what we have done is to come up with this thing called green light. essentially what this means is that we use AI to coordinate the green lights on the road to make sure that it's not green, red, green, red. You know, when you travel, it's green all the way as far as possible. And this way, A, you save the environment, B, you help to address some of the traffic congestion problems. You model the traffic patterns so that you improve the traffic flow. So this is something that we have started to deploy in a number of cities. In ASEAN, we have started in Jakarta and in Bali. Next slide. So you see some of the figures here. I'm not going to go into detail, but basically, you know, up to 10% reduction in emissions. So basically, you know, the impact, the cumulative impact of a technology like that is going to be enormous. Next slide. Next slide, please. I think I'll skip through. I'll just give the last example here. Really also one of my favorite projects, diabetes. Who has friends with diabetes or family with diabetes? I think, you know, many of us do. In ASEAN, you know, we have one of the highest rates of diabetes in the world. I think because we like to eat sweet things, we like to eat rice. And so, you know, it affects, you know, over 190 million people, whether you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, right? There's this really interesting condition. If you have diabetes, it's quite likely that, you know, you are at risk of this condition called diabetic retinopathy. So basically, it means that it's a condition that affects your eyes, and you will go blind if it's not detected early enough. So what we've done is we have used AI again. Next slide, please. Yeah, it causes total blindness, you know, with global population of 400 million people with diabetes. Next slide. What we have done is, because manual screening of diabetes and eye checks is so tedious, and in many countries around the world, they don't have enough eye doctors to do that screening. Right? So what we did was we developed an AI tool that is trained specifically to detect this thing in your eye. And we expanded this to screenings in rural communities. You know, it's a very small, nifty device that anyone can deploy. And this way you are able to detect and prevent blindness in a lot of people. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. So we are doing this in Thailand. For our Thai friends. So this is, you know, so these are some examples that I've given on current deployments of AI in ASEAN. There's so many more examples, you know, that are out there. But, you know, the ability to deploy these technologies is not a given, right? At the end of the day, you know, when businesses provide services, it depends on whether we are allowed to provide services in that country, and B, whether, you know what the regulatory environment in that country is, right? So this is not a given. This opportunity is not a given. And the choices that we make collectively as government, business, civil society will really shape the trajectory of the technology that we have before us. Next slide. So we have come up with 3 pillars of recommendations in terms of how best to seize that AI opportunity. Right, the first is really investing in innovation infrastructure. I'll go a little bit into detail on this. Second is really building skills, building an AI-ready workforce. And third is, how do you promote inclusive adoption, and how do you make sure that the technology is deployed widely in the population? Next slide. Yeah, sorry, the words are a bit small. When we talk about investing in innovation infrastructure, is not just about supercomputers, it's not just about compute power that's required to run these AI applications. Fundamentally, it's also about the soft infrastructure, and this is very relevant to the topic that we have at hand, right, that we're going to discuss today. How are we going to make sure that the regulatory environment is suitable for AI development, AI research, and AI deployment? Next slide. And at ASEAN level, there are certain things that can be done, you know, whether it's pulling resources, pulling data sets, pulling compute. Next slide. I only have 3 minutes, so I'm just going to rush through this, but I'll give you a QR code to the paper later. Next slide, please. Okay, AI-ready workforce. I think really thinking about exactly what you guys are doing today, right? Educating the next generation on AI, making sure that AI is in the curriculum of the primary schools, of the secondary schools, throughout the education system, and also how do you upskill people who are already in the workforce, right? How do you design programs that are fundamentally going to help people use AI in a useful and helpful way? Next slide. Let's skip over, please. And the last one, this is very important. There's a lot of talk about how AI could exacerbate the digital divide, and I agree. You see that the technologies are being developed in a couple of countries, so how do we make sure that we make the AI opportunity available to all? And this is something that we think about every day at Google, right? Because our mission is really to make sure that everybody has access to these technologies. So I think the first thing that we recommend is actually governments can lead the way by deploying AI in your public services. So whether it's a chatbot that you come up with when dealing with citizen complaints, or if there's a traffic problem or traffic light issue or something, someone's able to talk and interact with AI in a way that makes sense to them and that solves their problem. I think that's a really good way to help to encourage trust in the technology and encourage deployment more broadly. Second thing is really how do we make sure that the startups and the small businesses, the SMEs have this, right? So it's about skilling, it's about having regulation that is conducive and friendly to SMEs as well. And the third is really also about adopting certain standards, right? So if I'm a startup and I want to scale beyond Indonesia, right? I need to make sure that I comply. Let's say I want to go to Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. I will have to comply with the laws in each of these countries. If we can have common ASEAN standards on AI, right, that this Indonesian startup can say, okay, I've demonstrated compliance to this, I can now enter these other markets in ASEAN. I think that's going to help create that kind of room and opportunity for more growth among the startup community and not just the big techs. So I'll end here. I see a stop sign, but I am happy to talk about the regulation later, as we have that dialogue and conversation. Thank you. Sorry, could you just put the last slide? There's a QR code if you're interested in the paper. There are more detailed recommendations, but yeah, this is the QR code in case you're interested in reading further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Eunice, for that insightful introduction to case uses in AI. We've really seen that it's going to transform our lives, but again, there are issues, and the AI vision for ASEAN should really be a starting point for us to discuss and engage in regulation and what would be the best form of regulation for the region. So let me now call on Chris. Chris Marsden is Professor of Artificial Intelligence and Technology and the Law at the Monash University. He is also Director of the new digital group at Monash, as well as Associate Director for Global Governance of Data Futures Institute. He was co-director of the Warwick Monash Alliance, Brussels Effect of the AI Act workshops in 2023, and he will be co-director, or he is co-director of the Human Futures in the Age of AI that will be held at the Monash, which is a Monash Penn State Alliance conference that is forthcoming in April 2024. So he was also appointed, he's a member of the Australian Research Council's College of Experts for the period 2024 to 2026. So he joined Monash from Sussex Law School, where he was also Professor of Law from 2013 to 2022. Let's all welcome Chris Marsden.
So, hi everybody. As you can hear from my accent, I am English, although I live in Melbourne in Australia. So be prepared for the Englishman eating his words. I'll try not to do too much. There's lots of pictures, and I don't know who's driving the slides, but if we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. Monash Law School is actually celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. And I dug through the archives and discovered that Monash was actually set up in 1958 with this specific need for the urgent, specific regard to the urgent need for the establishment of courses in applied science and technology. That was in the 1958 Act of Parliament that set up the university. I don't think that that need has changed. In fact, it's probably increased. And I should say also, many, many people at Monash have done lots of work over the years advancing our knowledge about law and technology. My full chair title is AI, Technology and the Law. I think the comma was just in case AI turns out to be hype, so we covered ourselves for all technology, not just AI. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I've been in lots of places and done lots of things over many years, including working a lot with computer scientists and political scientists. I think that if you want to look at technology in the law, particularly at regulation and policy, you really need to work with people who have got the other disciplinary backgrounds as well. I know a lot of people in the room are law students. Talk to your colleagues in computer science, talk to your colleagues in political science, and they will really help you to understand the policy processes, because it's a long way from thinking about what may be an issue to actually coming to a solution to it, partial solution to it. Let's not get too exaggerated. And the book on the right, by the way, was written with a computer scientist. That is the ENIAC machine, the first digital computer. That's the front of it, not the back of it, for those of you who have never seen the ENIAC before. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things that I did many years ago was I worked with a group of scientists, and we thought we solved global internet regulation about 20 years ago. Turned out it didn't work entirely well, but it's just a way of saying, and I think that the dean or the rector said this at the beginning of the day, the history of technology law is very important to our understanding of how we deal with new technologies. You know, we don't come to this, you know, we weren't, to use an English expression, we weren't born yesterday, right? We've known about the history of technology law for a very long time. I should say, by the way, it's such a delight to be in Jakarta. I've been to Indonesia many times, but my last time in Jakarta was 1991, which is, I'm looking around the room and thinking, most of you weren't born in 1991. And I don't think Karawasi was even born in 1991. All this has been built since then. It was a long journey. It was a journey from Medan in the west to Kupang in the east over 2 months. So many buses, so many boats, but it was wonderful. So history is extremely important. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. AI, of course, is not new, and nor is hype around the abilities of AI. The difference is perhaps that we're actually solving some of those opportunities. The 1956 Dartmouth Conference, the founding fathers, as they were all then, of AI got together to try to solve the problem. And we talk a lot about artificial general intelligence, you know, the idea that somehow Skynet from the Terminator is coming to rule us all. I don't think that's very likely. The little tweet on the bottom right is from 2021, when GPT-3 was the thing. And looking at the fact that, of course, different parts of artificial intelligence have very different understandings of what they're dealing with, from machine learning to data visualization to search. You know, the biggest use of AI, I think, for Google is still in search, to make search even better. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll maybe skip over this slide, except to say that we know that computers don't think, but they do amazing things. So this is from Our World in Data. One of the extraordinary things that we've achieved is to brute force a lot of solutions that we couldn't have achieved 10 or even 20 years ago. In particular, I'd say as, again, a visitor who's not been to Jakarta for 33 years, I am finding Google Translate is so much better than it was even 10 years or 5 years ago, and that's a lot of that's down to AI. It makes a huge difference. Next slide, please. Thank you. You can pick your own favorite out of this. Next slide, please. And just to say that, of course, please remember, AI is, of course, built on a stack of technologies. So in the same way as people always said in a gold rush, in a rush to prospect for gold, the people who made the money were the people who sold the spades and shovels to dig for the gold. In the same way, be aware that a lot of us have now started to study NVIDIA, the company that makes a lot of the GPUs that are used to process data. Companies providing cloud computing are, of course, enormously important to this. So let's be aware, we're not just talking about the app that you might have. You know, people think of AI as being ChatGPT. It's a lot of layers below ChatGPT and other apps. Next slide, please. Okay, governments, of course, have to be very sober about these things. And again, when I was talking to the rector about telecommunications in the 90s, which I was also working in at much lower level than he was, we were talking about the fact that governments had to adapt and understand what they needed to do to allow a competitive environment. And part of this, of course, is knowing that innovation will happen and being in favor of innovation. I'm not sure it helps anybody if government says, we are pro-innovation. Of course you are. What would you be, against progress? I think they have to be a little bit more sober in some of their responses. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things that we may be in the presence of, there are, as I say, companies like Google and others are doing really deep research in AI. There is, of course, the potential for a bubble on the surface, and we need to be aware of this. A lot of us have lived through it. Internet hype in 1999, the dot-com boom, Web 2.0 hype in 2005, Bitcoin hype, which I was going to give a date to it, but I suppose it's still going on now. I won't ask how many people in the room own Bitcoin. I won't ask you that. But it'll be a few of you, I suppose. Blockchain hype, and of course, the NFT hype. I certainly won't ask who in the room owns an NFT, because that would be embarrassing to all of us, right? So we need to be aware of bubbles occurring. Next slide, please. And here's probably the biggest statement. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, which is a not-for-profit company, said, give me $7 trillion United States dollars, and I will build the infrastructure for this. Which sounds like quite a lot of money when you think about it. Having said that, if you actually add the value of Google and Facebook and Microsoft together, sorry, Alphabet and Meta and Microsoft, to give them their correct names, you're getting close to that amount of money, although I'm not sure that's in cash terms. But the infrastructure for AI will require a huge amount of money to build. And I always love the image of somebody saying, I work in IT, it's like working on a merry-go-round. And people say, oh, that sounds so wonderful. Yeah, but the merry-go-round might not work exactly as you thought it would. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to quickly talk about disinformation. I think you can tell I've already talked about disinformation in terms of some of the hype around AI, but I want to talk about a specific issue. By the way, this author is from Nepal, so that's why you get this wonderful Nepali version of a deep fake. Next slide, please. Okay, so deep fakes, which are created by, amongst other things, AI, although some of it's just very clever editing, are really coming after, I say 100 years, 1,000, 10,000 years of shallow fakes. The fact that we've had all kinds of things. My favorite as an Englishman is the Zinoviev letter of 1922. Please feel free to look it up. This was a fake suggesting that one of the British political parties was basically a Soviet agent. But there have been fakes over the years. This year, the Joe Biden fakes for voice, video fakes. It should be said, video fakes are not, frankly, much better than just very careful editing. But we do know there has been huge problems, particularly in ASEAN and ASEAN's near neighbors, with disinformation. The problems of platforms not employing people that spoke enough of the languages of the markets that the companies were in. I'm thinking specifically here, of course, of Meta, and I suppose I'm thinking specifically of Myanmar. We know about the problem that occurred with the Rohingya persecution in Myanmar, which was, at the time it began to happen in Myanmar, there were no native speakers of the language who were moderating content. It's not a very responsible use of a technology. And it's also worth saying, of course, there's a scale issue. In English-speaking countries, we're obsessed with Elon Musk because he's so obsessed with himself, it's infected the rest of us. But also because we think of X or Twitter as being a very important platform. But of course it's not. WhatsApp, Facebook, in terms of the number of users, maybe 3,000 times larger, 30 times larger than X. So we have to be a little careful about who is our regulatory target. And I won't speak about the metaverse very much, but all those people who have written about law in the metaverse, I wish them luck in their future careers, but the hype is perhaps there for that one. Next slide, please. Thank you. So onto the specifics of law. I, with a colleague from political science and a colleague from computer science, wrote a report for the European Parliament in 2018 called Regulating Disinformation with Artificial Intelligence. There's a twist to it. The twist is this. What happens is that the big digital platforms, Google, Meta, and other, I suppose to some extent Twitter, they regulate the information that's on their networks that's placed there, And they use AI very effectively to remove a lot of the harmful content. So it's about what do governments do to encourage those platforms to responsibly use AI to regulate. There's a lot of change there. Let's repeat that. Governments persuading platforms to use AI to regulate harmful speech. And there you can see that's the European Parliament. It wasn't that full when we presented, but we presented to them at the end of 2018. Next slide, please. And that's myself with Tricia Meyer, political scientist, presenting it. We then kind of collated the responses in a report in an academic article 2020. Next slide, please. And we basically suggested the model was this. At the bottom, you have voluntary compliance. So this is the regulatory triangle. You could call it a pyramid, I guess. At the bottom, voluntary compliance, then self-regulation. I should say this is not our triangle, but it's been used many times. Co-regulation between government and industry. That's what I'm going to argue is the ideal approach. So in other words, government makes sure industry is doing the correct application of regulation under the law, but it's still being carried out by industry. So it's self-regulation encouraged by industry, what we call co-regulation. Industry standards are enormously important, and they could, by the way, be at any point in that triangle. So the standards that industry uses. And then at the top, regulatory laws, the kind of telecom law type stuff that that the rector was talking about earlier. Next slide, please. Okay. We made 5 recommendations to ensure the rule of law in the way that you moderate content. The first one, I think, is, I suppose, very sensible, but the hardest, which is media literacy and user choice, making sure people understand. You guys have probably always known the internet as you were growing up. Some of us are a little older and we have had to learn what we're doing, and we've had to learn the difference in trust between newspapers and television channels and online. And we still find it difficult, and frankly, because old people tend to be the most regular voters, we are the most vulnerable group. So please spare some thought for your parents and grandparents who are struggling with this stuff. Second is actually about appeal processes. It's not a problem of whether or not platforms can take down content. It's about when they realize they've made a mistake and put it back up again. So I've been told to stop, so I'll just do 2 more slides. Next slide, please. We also produced a big study for the Commonwealth. That's the former British Empire. 56 countries, looking at how this could be done. This was a group of computer scientists and others. Electoral cybersecurity in the Commonwealth. And this is perhaps a good moment to mention that, of course, this is the year of elections in democracies. And, of course, Indonesia has recently had an election which was successful for some candidates and where there was some success in tackling disinformation. And I'm really interested over the next 2 days to find out more about how that was done. Next slide, please. And we made a series of recommendations in 2021 about how you deal with disinformation in this book called Regulating Big Tech, which is from Oxford University Press. And I might finish here. But just to say, one of the things that we wrote in 2018 for the European Parliament and then 2019 or 2020 for the Commonwealth was we think that governments should ensure that the internet is still available on the day of an election and in the days after an election, because is it really likely that any candidate for an election in a democracy would go so far as to try to create civil unrest because they dispute the result of an election? And of course, what we didn't realize even in spring of 2020 was that that was exactly what Donald Trump did at the end of that year. So it turns out that the conclusions that we were trying to create across the world also applied to what thinks of itself as the world's greatest democracy. So we have big problems with how we deal with regulation right across the world, from Indonesia to Australia to the United States. And I really look forward to studying the results of the elections here in Indonesia, but also in the United States and the European Parliament, to see whether or not these recommendations have to change. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris, for introducing us to the prospects of regulating technology, AI. This leads me now to our third speaker, so our very own John Riyadi. So John is the CEO of Lipo Karawaci, Indonesia, the largest home builder and healthcare company in Indonesia. He holds a number of directorships and executive positions within the Lipo group of companies. He is also co-founder of Ventura Capital, which is the region's first homegrown venture fund. And Ventura actually has invested in technology companies, including those that employ AI, such as Bang Jamin. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's an AI-powered car insurance company, and also Prixa AI, which provides integrated health services. So John holds a BA, Bachelor of Arts in Political Philosophy and Economics from Georgetown University, an MBA from Wharton, and a JD from Columbia University. Let's all give a warm round of applause for John.
Selamat pagi, Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati. Good morning. I see so many familiar faces in the audience. It's always a pleasure to be back at UPH. There was a time when I maybe came here every day, or 4 or 5 days a week, and I had fond memories of my time here and teaching at the university. So thank you for inviting me back to this beautiful campus. It's also good to see Eunice. Eunice is a friend who I've known for maybe 15 years when she was stationed here at some point at the embassy here, and then I didn't expect to see you here, but it's a real pleasure to see you here, and also with Google now. Also, Professor, hope you'll be back again here in less than 32 years. 1991 was actually when, I think 1992 was when the university had its first intake. So a lot has changed since then. I'd like to add a little bit about my thoughts on regulation and technology, in addition to what both my fellow panelists has shared. Many of us here today, I think, take for granted how unique and how special of a time we are living through today. What we're going through today and the changes that we're seeing, the innovation that we're seeing around not only artificial intelligence, but also big data, the internet, mobile technology. I mean, there's a bunch of different technologies all coming together at the same time, causing really an explosion of just growth and productivity and changes that I think will be unthinkable in the decades ahead. If we take a look at the history of sort of mankind, 2,000 years of economic activity, frankly, for about 1,700 years, it's pretty flat and pretty boring and uneventful. And when we had the agricultural revolution, you saw a little bit of a spike in productivity. Then we saw the industrial revolution, again, a little bit of a spike. But really, it's only been in the last 40 years that we've seen a massive exponential rise in productivity and corresponding economic activity because of the technologies that has been invented. And so that chart pretty much looks like this, and then really in the last 50 years, it's jumped. But I think if 50 years from now, when we look back at the chart, the jump we'll see in the last 50 years will make the jump that we saw in the last 50 years from in the past, standing here right now, look fairly small. So really all the technologies that's been brewing, all the infrastructure that's been put in place in the last 20, 30 years, I think finally, in the next 3, 4, 5 decades, will manifest itself in all of our lives and really change our world in a way that, if we take a look at a lot of the sci-fi movies, might be quite close to reality. And we see that today. The professor mentioned a number of companies, Google, or Alphabet, Microsoft, etc. More recently, we have NVIDIA, a company that, frankly, 3 months ago, few people knew. If you were in the industry, you knew. Otherwise, you kind of probably read that in some server somewhere in a computer. You saw their logo. But today, NVIDIA is a $2.2 trillion market cap company. Just to put that in perspective, the entire Indonesian Stock Exchange, Bursa Efek Indonesia, all the companies you add up together is about $600 billion. $600 billion. So this one company is more than 3 times or almost 4 times all the companies in Indonesia put together, on the Indonesian Stock Exchange put together. So you can imagine how large this space is. Obviously, NVIDIA is benefiting from at the moment, it's a massive supply constraint, so pricing is high, margins are unusually high. That will probably settle down at some point. But the point is, a lot of economic wealth is being created. But as I think Eunice also mentioned, the potential of AI goes beyond just economic creation. The promise of AI and technology, I think, lies in the promise of technology to solve some of humanity's deepest challenges. Eunice mentioned a few: flooding, the environment, climate, very, very important challenges. I'd mention 2 more that I think are quite relevant to our world in Indonesia. One is our world's aging and shrinking population. In Indonesia, we don't talk about this because we always feel like we have a very young population. And so we think that's a problem for the Japanese, that's a problem for the Chinese because of the one-child policy. But that's not exactly true. In 1990, the world's total fertility rate, right, with the TFR is basically how many kids an average woman can expect to have in their lifetime, was 3.3. So in 1990, that number was 3.3. The average woman can expect to have 3.3 children. That's globally. Today, that number is down to 2.3. And anything below 2.1, that's below replacement rate. So the population starts shrinking and aging. What's that number in Indonesia? Right, we often talk about the demographic dividend. We talk about how half the population is under 35 years old. What's that TFR number in Indonesia? It's 2.3. And actually, in about 15 years, it's going to be about 2.1. So very soon, we'll be facing some of the same challenges that some of the more advanced countries around the world are facing. And so we're shrinking and aging population. And by the way, 2/3 of the people in this whole world live in countries and societies where populations are aging and shrinking. And that's very important because you think about it, in the whole history of humanity, population has always increased. Now we're at about 8 billion people in the world. That number has always increased. I think we'll reach peak population at around 9, they say, although that number continues to shift. But economic growth and activity has never really been a problem for us because the number of people on this planet continues to increase. But in our lifetime, certainly in many of your lifetimes over the next 50 years, we're going to be living in a world where actually populations are shrinking. China, by 2075, will only have 500 million people. Right? So you can see, once we start going down, we can argue how fast that trend will happen, but the trend is, I think, inevitable. And when that happens, we need to increase productivity massively to make up for the reduction in population. And so I think technology, such as including AI, hold the promise to this. And a lot of people today attribute the strength of the US economy in the last 12 months, unexpected strength of the US economy, even in light of interest rates increasing, also because of the advances and the impact of technology. So I just wanted to flag that as, I think, one macro challenge that we'll be facing in the world. And I think AI and technology has the potential to address this. Very quickly, number 2, politics. We've obviously in Indonesia just gone through our very fun and exciting elections. We're not fully done yet technically, but we're almost there. But this year, over half of the world's population will be having some form of national election. So this is not a uniquely Indonesia thing. India, obviously, the biggest. The US later on this year. Indonesia, we've had ours. Russia, in their own way, they'll be having theirs, I think, later on this year as well. So half of the world's population will be going through some form of a national election this year. And the issue of misinformation and all these related things is very serious. If you read in The Economist, they talk about sort of the return. What we're seeing now is the return of the strongmen. So if you take a look at election after election after election, we're seeing this trend of democratic countries really re-electing candidates that are in some ways perceived as strongmen. That's The Economist's view, not necessarily my own view. But they do make some arguments as to why that's the case and the role that technology plays, the role that TikTok has played in social media and deep fakes and all these different things. And so we see very clearly that technology and AI has both massive upside and downside potential. Massive upside potential in the ways that I've described, economic, but also in many good ways to address and solve humanity's problems, but also can be potentially highly damaging because of democratic processes, information, and things like that. And so I think the topic of today's conference on how do we regulate this technology is extremely appropriate. And generally, I'm actually in very strong alignment with what the framework that the professor has outlined. My view on regulating technology is that generally it's impossible. Technology changes so fast and takes on so many different forms. And so the ability of governments to regulate is highly limited. And so, my philosophy on regulating technology has always been to take a light touch approach. But yes, there needs to be certain principles and certain baseline regulation that needs to be in place. One that the professor also mentioned is around transparency and disclosure. I think all of us, users, consumers, deserve to know when we're interacting with a non-human, when we're speaking with a non-human. So basic disclosure and transparency around if an image, of a video, if a call center, whatever, is a non-human being generated content, I think at least that should be disclosed. So I look at that as a basic baseline regulation. Number two it would be the user privacy and data protection. This is something that I think is not new to AI, but I think needs to continue to be a major principle when thinking about regulation. A third is auditing and validation, something that Professor also mentioned. AI moves so fast, so it's impossible for us for governments to approve things before they're issued or before they're published. However, after the fact, if there's reason to believe that the models are flawed in some ways or biased in some ways or dangerous in some ways, then I think there should be means for law enforcement agencies to audit the model to see whether it's a fairly objective and constructive model. So generally, those are my views. I saw the 3-minute mark a couple of minutes ago. But I just wanted to, once again, thank the university for this opportunity. I think this is an extremely exciting topic. AI will be, and technology will be a game changer in our world today and in the lives of most of you. And I think we have to find the right optimal way of regulating and nurturing this technology in a way that allows innovation to continue to thrive, in a way that allows society to continue to benefit from technology, but also when there are problems, and as there will be, allow us to be agile enough to respond to the problems without killing the entire technology. Thank you very much.
John. We're now going to proceed with Q&A, and I will pose first a few questions to tease out our topic this morning on regulating AI in Asia. So my first question is for you, Eunice, if you may. John has spoken that AI is practically, not just AI, but also technology, it's practically impossible to regulate. What is your opinion on this, considering indeed that in Asia and around the world, AI is moving so fast, and with newer discoveries, particularly in neural deep networks, as well as modifying AI. So, as changes happen so fast, do you think we will catch up, particularly Asia?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to a very, very fast-moving technology, and to be honest, still pretty nascent if we're talking about generative AI technologies, right? Like ChatGPT came really online November 2022, was it 22? Yeah. So if you think about, since then, there's been a lot of talk about trying to regulate it. I think with these kind of new technologies, you can put in frameworks, principles, what your end goal should be, right? So that companies should disclose when AI is being used. There should be certain transparency obligations imposed on companies. But in terms of putting in hard law, hard regulation, I think it may be a little bit premature. Because we really don't know how this technology is going to develop. So what we've always advocated for is you should have very nimble regulatory options and frameworks. So what we have seen being done in some countries, even in the US, it's not done through real regulation, but it's done through an executive order from the White House. The EU has chosen another approach, the EU AI Act, but I think even then you see limitations to that, right? Like in terms of exactly how high-risk AI should be defined. There's been a lot of tussle on like what exactly goes into the high-risk category. Do you really want to list down every single application? When you're talking about LLMs, large language models, these models power many different types of applications: image generation, video generation, text prompts. The kind of applications is at the end of the day is a general purpose technology, right? Quite like electricity, quite like the internet even, right? So how are you going to license every single application that comes out of this model? So I think I would agree with John in that, you set out some guardrails in terms of principles. You have that flexibility and a nimbleness to shift, to pivot as you see problems occurring. And when we talk a lot about these AI regulations, you also think from the perspective of companies, right? It is a competitive advantage for companies to be seen to be responsible and to be seen to be proactively, engaging its users on basically transparency, labeling of, say, for us, we have put out this policy that YouTube creators need to label if they are using synthetic content, AI-generated content in their YouTube videos. So things like that, I think, there's also an incentive for companies to behave responsibly. So that co-regulatory model between governments, companies, I think at this point seems to be a very sensible approach for now. If you put in the very hard regulation, if you try to draw the sandbox right now, and say you can only play within this little space, I think you may risk, potentially not having a lot of very important innovations that come out of this technology.
Okay, thank you, Eunice. But my next question is for Chris. Chris, knowing that in Asia, and most of the countries in the region are actually just sort of catching up. As you mentioned, we do not have the structure and our energy potential and capacity is also not up for the large amounts of energy that would be needed for these types of technologies. So what do you think should be is it really time to regulate in Asia, or should Asia, have a different approach to adopting technologies such as AI?
Is this on? So I always begin my remarks by saying that am I a specialist on any country? If I am a specialist on any country, it would be a shock to my friends who are also comparative lawyers. I know about Australia, I know about the United Kingdom, which is having some kind of a late life crisis as a government, but also the European Union. And when we say Asia, I was shocked a few years ago. I went into a restaurant in, it wasn't in Melbourne, and they said, we serve Asian food. And I said, I have no idea what you mean by that. This is 5 billion people, and you say you're serving Asian food? Is it Indonesian? Is it Chinese? Is it Indian? Is it Lebanese? It could be, you know, from anywhere in Asia. So I would never, ever suggest that there's a model that can be applied for Indonesia, for instance, specifically. However, I think there are certain general opinions, and John made this really good point. When you're talking to, say, a healthcare chatbot, you want to know if you're actually talking to the chatbot or you're talking to a doctor. And it's really important. And I think one of the great things about the pandemic, which is an extraordinary experiment in social engineering or in society's development, is that people who 10 years ago, famously doctors, you say, oh, 10 years ago you would have patients coming in to see the doctor and they'd already just talked to Dr. Google, right? In other words, they'd looked up on Google what they thought were their symptoms and they came in with their list of things. It's what 40 years ago, if I can be really old, we used to call Dr. Index, which is that people thought that people looked up a medical textbook. You know, they had a book at home and they looked up their symptoms. They said, I've got everything, including contents and index, right? Because they just thought they had everything in the book. And one of the fascinations about the pandemic is that we have real problems with people thinking that, I'm sure that all of these, I'm looking at a room full of people who are going to be AI lawyers in 5 years' time, I'm sure, in law firms. You know, one of the big problems we have is that people think they can substitute knowledge that they take from the internet for professional knowledge. And professional knowledge is not something which is likely to be replaced anytime soon by AI. AI may augment it, and it may be a useful addition both to professionals and to members of the public. But when we have, this large proportion of the population of, for instance, the United States, but it's a problem in Australia and other places as well, people saying, I know better than public health experts, I know that you don't need a vaccination when it comes to COVID. These are really, really, really major problems. And I think that, Indonesia would share with Australia and with other countries the thought that, there is dangerous misinformation out there. And, political misinformation is something we can debate all day and all night because, one person's politics is different to another person's. But, this substantial disinformation about public health is something which I know Google has had to struggle with over the years and is a major problem. So yes, there are certain things that I think we all worry about equally, and at the same time, don't ever walk into a restaurant that says it serves Asian food.
Okay, thank you, Chris. My next question is for John. John, you are, of course, a venture capitalist and you've invested in AI companies. And so we're very much interested in the uptake of AI in Indonesia and what kind of regulation do you want to take shape in the country as well as in the region?
Pak Jerry, selamat datang. Pak Wamen.
So let us welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Jerry Sambuaga.
Izin Pak Wamen. Thank you, Jessica, for the question. Venture capital in Indonesia and Southeast Asia is a fairly new thing. If you go to a place like Silicon Valley, it's been around, the ecosystem's been around for maybe 50, 60, 70 years by now. And they've maybe gone through 4 or 5 cycles, ups and downs, booms and busts. And every time, with every cycle, it gives birth to a new generation of companies, maybe 10,000 companies, 99% of them die, but the few that make it are the ones that end up being the giants in the next generation, and so on and so forth. And so places like that, the ecosystem is very rich and mature and very deep. Then you got places like China, Europe, maybe a little bit lesser developed than the US, arguably. Then you got places like Indonesia and Southeast Asia, where the ecosystem is extremely nascent. one can say that it's only been in the last 10 years where we've had some form of a sort of a technology sort of ecosystem mature enough to benefit from this last cycle. Finally, people's affordability levels are high enough. Almost everyone has a mobile phone, and et cetera. And so it allows for business models that are technology-oriented to thrive in a place like Indonesia. So in a place like Indonesia where things are still fairly nascent, generally the companies that we see here are companies that are applying technology to existing businesses to either make things more efficient, more personalized, open up new channels, but really it's applications of technology, and it's not what people say really is deep technology. Where Indonesia's highly, highly unlikely to invent the next ChatGPT. Highly, highly unlikely to invent, the Google search engine. We're just not there yet. I don't think it's a good or a bad thing. We're just not there yet. There's still much more lower hanging fruit. So for a lot of venture capitalists in the region, oftentimes we're looking at applications of technology in healthcare, in commerce, in trade, in B2B businesses and things like that. And so I would say that the ecosystem here will benefit from AI and technology, but in a different way than some of the more mature ecosystems in the world will benefit. The second part of your question around regulation, I think I've addressed some of this in my earlier remarks. Generally, I think we need a regulatory framework and a mindset that is pro-innovation, because the potential of technology and artificial intelligence is massive, economically, societally, et cetera. So we need to find a way that allows and nurtures all that. At the same time, if there are problems that come up, we need to be able to deal with them in a fairly agile way. But as Eunice has mentioned, in Europe, their philosophy oftentimes is taking a risk-based approach to regulation. The problem with a lot of new technology like this, and especially ones that are so transformational, is at the outset, everything seems high risk. So you end up over-regulating. Obviously, the US, again, you alluded to this, takes on a bit more of a self-voluntary framework. Neither is perfect. You can see the problems with both. But I think, on balance, I think the US sort of self-voluntary regime plus a little bit of basic guidelines or principles is probably the better approach.
Okay, thank you very much. My last question is for Eunice, before we open the floor to the audience. Eunice, John has actually really characterized the state of technology in Asia as merely adoption rather than, so it's quite impossible for us to be developers and designers of AI and these amazing technologies that are now being developed. So from your experience in Singapore, Singapore in 2010 already was really very forward-looking in the way that you governed and looked at the potential of technology. So what can you advise the region in terms of actually trying to regulate artificial intelligence as well as other technologies from the Singapore experience?
Hi, can you hear me? So I think the key terminology that the Singapore government uses is not AI regulations, AI governance. And when you think about it, governance is more than regulation. Governance is, yes, so Singapore, so just to put the facts out there, it has not regulated AI. It has put in advisory guidelines on the use of personal information in terms of AI systems that just came out last week. It's put in model AI governance frameworks. So basically to say that if you are an AI company, you should have certain governance processes within your company, right? Like to make sure that you check the data, make sure it's not biased, things like that, guidelines, but nothing that is binding on companies at this point. I think they recognize that, the technology is still moving so fast, and it doesn't make sense. They don't want to do the European way of regulation. So that space. But beyond that, it's not just putting in these guidelines. I think the key thing that the Singapore government has done is to encourage deployment and application of AI. I think the Singapore government also knows that Singapore is unlikely to develop a really complex large language model, right? They're trying to do this thing with a Southeast Asia language model, but that's very small, that's really tiny. But what they're trying to do is to make sure that their companies know how to use AI. So they are partnering, it's a very interesting project that Google has done with the Singapore government. It's called AI Trailblazers. And what we do is we partner, so Google offers the technology, we offer our models for 3 months. We partner with Singapore public sector agencies, right, whether it's the water agency or the trade ministry or whatever, and also with Singapore companies, small businesses and large businesses. And together we create use cases, proof of concepts of how AI, and specifically generative AI, can be used in their specific context. So one example was we partnered with Singapore, I think one of the polytechnics, I can't remember which one, where lecturers always have to come up with like slides and all that. We worked with them to have a way of basically creating slide decks, quizzes and all that, just using generative AI. You give the right prompts, you write a program based on that, and that is applied throughout the school now, right? So very practical uses of how AI can be useful for people in different industries. And I think that kind of program that the Singapore government has put together, I think forms in their mind, part of the broader AI governance and sort of promotion type of framework.
Chris, you want to add?
Yeah, just very, very, very quick. So one country, or one region I do know about is Europe. And I want to reassure everybody that most of what the Europeans say about their Artificial Intelligence Act is propaganda. It will be years before it's implemented in terms of actual regulation of businesses. Of course, it's not even yet law. It won't actually become law until probably May, just before the European Parliament elections in June of this year. So it's not even law yet. When it is law, there is a 2 to 3 year, depending upon the terms, implementation period. And also for any Indonesian businesses or lawyers looking to move to Europe, be aware there are 27 countries that have to implement this law. You move your business to Ireland, the Irish are lovely people, they're not very keen on regulation. I promise you they will be very, very pro-innovation in their approach to regulation. So the Europeans talk a really big game about regulation. Be aware that for a lot of Google, of course, can already tell you about what goes on in Dublin, that for businesses, the experience on the ground in terms of enforcement is not anything like as strict as, or kind of, licensing, risk aware as you might think. And also the other thing which I think is really, really important about the way in which the Europeans regulate is that because of that 27 countries, you get yourself to Ireland where they regulate very little. I've been quite critical of the Irish regulators in data protection. You then can work in the other 26 countries. So what they say about, this is going to be such a, I'm sure that, the minister and others have all heard about this European AI Act is going to be so all-encompassing and so comprehensive. It really, really, really won't be, I promise. And you'll never hear this from a European lawyer because I've now kind of, gone, well, in that case, we don't need to invite a European lawyer in future because it's all just, I was about to use a rude word, there's a lot of propaganda involved.
Hey, thank you very much, Chris. We just have around 2 to 3 questions from the audience. Kindly, if anybody is interested to raise a question, I think we have, there's one over there. Our ushers will hand you over the microphone over there. And, we have lots of hands. So I think we're just going to choose 3. The gentleman over there, and then the lady in the middle, and then one to the right. Okay, from here. So, let's hear your questions. Yeah, thank you. Yes, we'll start with him. So kindly state your name and then whom you want to address the question to.
Hello, my name is Naufal, and I'm addressing the question in general. So maybe, I guess Professor Chris could answer this. I would just like to say that since AI content in art is like very common these days, and how would you like just regulate it on a smaller scale? Because if you're regulating big companies, it's easy because it's like you can see it, but on these smaller scales, like smaller artists getting their art stolen by AI, etc., how would you regulate that? Thanks.
So you're very interested in how your artwork is regulated in a small
and
scale.
like how to enforce that.
So I'll be brief, and I think that a question from the audience that isn't talking to the two people who can give you a job is always a brave one to start with. So very quickly, if you're interested in copyright and AI, then I'll refer you to a great friend and colleague of mine, Andres Guadamos. Go online, look for Technolama. And Technolama, that's double L, is the expert on copyright and AI. And the answer to your question about basically a micro-enterprise, right, single artist or a very small collective of artists or so on, the likelihood of you being affected by regulation in this space is low. On the other hand, the likelihood of your works, if you publish them on the internet, if you ever tried to make money out of an NFT a couple of years ago when people thought that was a thing, they may well have been gobbled up by a large AI model. And again, I'm afraid not only is your likelihood of being regulated low, but your likelihood of making any money out of suing giant generative AI models for copyright infringement is also really low. The New York Times New York Times might make some money out of it, but I don't think small artists are going to make money from that. So, as always, the artist gets stiffed, unfortunately, right? But you know that's as a career choice, it's a brave one, and we need you. But you're not in it for the money, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you. I think the gentleman over there, yes. And then we have the lady in the middle, yes. Is the microphone, Imejo? Maybe you can hand over the microphone. Okay. So this lady over in the middle then, if you can hand over the microphone to her. And maybe we can request you to approach the mic. I think it would be much more efficient. Yes.
All right, good morning. Hi, I'm Priscilla. I'm a second-year student from Universitas Pelita Harapan, and I think I would ask a curious question among students to Ms. Eunice. Thank you. The question is, what would your stances be in regulating AI, specifically in the realms of the academical world, where AI is mostly despised? As you said earlier, that we should be more inclusive in introducing AI, such as by introducing it into elementary school students' curriculum to build an AI-friendly workforce in the future. However, AI, as of right now, for academics, is usually deemed as lazy or even plagiarizing. Thank you very much.
Sorry, can I just clarify the question? You're asking about how AI should be applied in academia? Students
yes.
be allowed to use AI?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's a really tricky question that, to be very honest, as Google, I don't have a position on. I think what I can tell you is that, there are uses of AI that we have, so if you, for example, if you use Google Docs these days and you're trying to write an essay or something, you have a sidebar where you can basically ask questions, right? It's a little bit like search, but then, some more advanced. I think that kind of knowledge generation and sort of asking questions and sort of refining of language has been quite useful in terms of especially if you're not a native speaker of the language. So one of the most interesting things I've heard from my colleagues who are not native English speakers is that, when they use that to write essays or they are writing emails, it's so much easier because, it helps to refine the essays that they write and the language that they use. But I think on the issue of, whether you should be using ChatGPT or Gemini to generate your school homework and essays, I think this is still an issue that's up for discussion. I do personally feel that, there's some level of human, I think we can find a balance in that, but in terms of academia and testing of really whether you know that knowledge, I think some high degree of human work is needed to be able to assess that. However, I think the education system is going to change, right? My daughter is 5 years old. I don't think in future her exams will be like, tell me the history of the French Civil War, revolution. Is not going to be like that. That doesn't really add a lot of value, I think, in the world 20 years later, right? When you can just ask a prompt and get that. Maybe the exams, I was just talking to my husband the other day, maybe exams would be, how do you write the best prompts, right? How do you write the best prompts to get actually the answers that you need? Or to if you're a designer, how do you write the best prompts to get the kind of designs that you need for your work? So I think it's still an open question. The TLDR I think, is an open question. It's up for debate. But we have to, I think, it's not something that companies, I think, have all the answers to, but it's something that we need to find an equilibrium, as a whole society.
Okay, thank you, Eunice. If you might know, the Google and other developers are actually beginning to watermark the outputs from generative AI. So I think our students should be a bit careful also. It's a good starting point if you want to use, if I may add, if you want to use ChatGPT, we all do, but it's just a starting point. You should make sure that you're able to develop your, and provide for your own insights and develop whatever work you need to do, essays or arguments as law students. So we have one final question. Yes, can you hand over the microphone to her, please?
Good morning, Miss Eunice, Miss Miss Jessica, Mr. John Riyadi, and Mr. Christopher. My name is Dewi Tampu Bolon. I'm a student at Law Faculty, Universitas Pelita Harapan. My question is, with my all due respect to Mr. John Riyadi, this question is for you. What is the UPH policy in creating early education for students to use rapidly evolving technology? Because we know that productive age is greatly aided by technology, but what is the policy for the children under a certain age? As we know, Lipo Group provides education starting from kindergarten. Thank you so much.
It's an excellent question, but a difficult one. I think this links to the question that was asked previously around what is the role of these technologies in education. I'm not an education specialist. So my views are my own and really form more because of looking just at how my 4 kids learn and interact with technology and how they absorb information around them. But I do think that generally the nature of education will change. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? Again, I mentioned a company called NVIDIA earlier in my comments. The CEO of NVIDIA mentioned that in the future, you don't need to learn how to code. In the last 20 years, everyone's been talking about how programming, coding has to be a basic part of the curriculum. Everyone needs to learn how to code. But today, Jensen's view is we should be able to interact with technology in a very human way. I should be able to speak with Bahasa or English, and the machine should be able to create the code. I won't have to translate what I want into code and then back again. And that's true with so many other things. I think even with languages, growing up, I was, oh, you have to learn Chinese, and China. I've obviously failed miserably. But I wonder whether we'll actually have to learn, because simultaneous translation, everything will become so fast that I wonder if languages will be spoken and will be used in the way that we use languages today. So many sort of fundamental questions around information and knowledge that you have to ask yourself, why what should how can we reimagine education? And so this question becomes even more difficult if you talk about early childhood education, even more difficult. Because a lot of the things that my kids now, I see their homework, frankly, it's so useless. It's so useless. And I also see the kids have no motivation to answer the question because it's such a bad question, such a useless question. But at some level, in life, you got to learn to do things you don't like. So sometimes I still get him to just do it anyways, even though I feel sorry for him because it's such a, I know that it carries no consequence. So I don't know is the short answer, but I think what we do know is that education will have to change for schools to produce graduates who can thrive in this new world. And how we do it is a question for all of us, it's a question for all of you to figure out. I'm not entirely answering your question, but at least these are some reflections that I have on the same topic. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. With that, we bring a close our plenary panel on regulating technology in Asia. So let's give our expert panelists a very warm round of applause. I think we should call on to give our tokens of appreciation. Yes?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Chris, before you leave, yeah. I'm sorry. Maybe we call on Jerry. Yeah, back to you, Julia.
That was indeed a remarkable session filled with insightful presentations. Now, I kindly request all our presenters to remain on stage for a special appreciation and documentation session. For the participants, may I kindly remind you to maintain a conducive environment to ensure the seamless continuity of our event. To express our gratitude, Ms. Jessica will present tokens of appreciation to our presenters. Thank you to our fantastic speakers, Ms. Eunice Huang, Professor Christopher Marsden, Pak John Riadi, as well as our chair, Ms. Jessica. As a part of the ICRTA, we are privileged to host a keynote speech from the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, the Deputy Minister of Trade, Dr. Jerry Sambuaga.
Tes. Oke, baik, terima kasih. Shalom, salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Good evening, good morning to all of you. yang saya hormati Pak John Riyadi, our big boss, Pak John, Ibu Dekan, Ibu Feliana Tanaya, Bu Dokter, dan all the officials from UPH, all the distinguished speakers, and of course students from UPH, from other campus, particularly from Fakultas Hukum Universitas Pelita Harapan. I was asking Ibu Dekan apa ada murid-murid dari FISIP di sini? Nggak ada ya? Ada yang dari FISIP di sini? FISIP HI ada? Nggak ada ya? Oke. So, Bapak Ibu sekalian, thank you for having me here. It feels good to be back at UPH. I was a lecturer at UPH from 2008 to 2019. So it feels like home, Pak John. But right now, I will be speaking on behalf of the Ministry of Trade. As Vice Minister of Trade, I will be delivering some remarks and some elaborations on how trade, AI, technology, and all that, probably could collaborate with each other. So before I specifically talk on AI or technology, I think I've been given, around 20 minutes, Pak John and Bu Dekan, to deliver my remarks. But I think for the first 5 minutes, I think I will be explaining on how Indonesian trade currently is doing in the right moment. Because I'm from the Ministry of Trade, so I should be giving this explanation on trade. Izin ya, Pak John. So, Bapak Ibu sekalian, students, as we know that now is the year of 2024. We just finished our election, thank God that we successfully held our election, and I hope that the result, at least the temporary result, we will be having our permanent result in 20 March. But as you know, that the quick count already finished and so on, that one of the candidates already won, and I hope, and I'm quite optimistic that some of you, most of you, feel good about the result of the election. Yeah, I hope so. So it's a very good moment for us to face the year of 2024 with optimistic views. So in terms of our trade, Indonesia's economic growth, I think has been steady for quite some time, and we have maintained the level of 5%. And as you know, that the trend, as is mentioned by international institutions such as IMF and the World Bank, they have repeatedly mentioned that economic growth in the world, I think, is decreasing. And yet Indonesia is maintaining our economic growth in the level of 5%. So that's the first good indication that our economy is going well. Second is our trade balance. Our trade balance has been consistently in the level of surplus. As you know, that you can see in this picture that the surplus has been going on for 45 months, Pak John. So I became a vice minister in October 2019, almost 4.5 years. And 45 months, Pak John, we successfully maintained our trade balance. Not because I'm the vice minister, but because all the work that the ministry and also all the government institutions have done. As you know, that the surplus, the value of the surplus is not low. 36.93 billion, and with the inflation rate of below 3%, 2.61%. So these three, economic growth, trade balance, and low inflation, they are actually contributing to our good shape of economy. So that's why, right here, right now, I would like to assert again, reassert that our economy is actually in a good condition. So this is the first information that I would like to give. The message is very clear, crystal clear, that our economy is going well, and particularly our trade is increasing in the highest ever. Now, the next topic is on technology. I was informed by the panitia that this conference is about technology, AI platform, blockchain, and so on. I understand that technology is evolving. Yeah. As the previous speakers, including Pak John, has already mentioned about how technology can coexist together with the nature of education. But it's quite interesting, yeah, to talk about specific cases. I was talking to Ibu Dekan just now about ChatGPT. I never used ChatGPT, but I know some people, particularly students now, are using ChatGPT. So what I can think of it right now, how do we react, how do we respond? I totally agree with Pak John that the nature of education must change, should change. So how do we change it? Yeah. I remember back then when I was a student, yeah, when we would write essays, Pak John. There's an application called Turnitin. I don't know if you guys are still using it or not. So this is a platform that you submit your essays, and then this application would see whether or not that your essays are quoting or actually using references correctly. Turnitin was born because it's a response to how people, how students can just easily have references from the internet. But now, it's not like that anymore. You have ChatGPT. So my solution, this is just a brainstorming. Yeah. In order to respond with this kind of improvement, with this kind of technology, so I urge, yeah, at least the UPH. Students, if you want to write essays, please, lecturers, dosen-dosen, students must write essay in class. Writing. Ya, supaya nggak jiplak-jiplak, supaya nggak pakai itu ChatGPT. Writing. So lecturers would give time, okay, you write essays in front of me, 15 minutes. Or you can bring your laptop, I will be sitting next to you, and I will see you writing your own. This is just an example, Bu Dekan, Pak John. Why? Because technology, yeah, you cannot really avoid the improvement of technology, right? You must adapt, right? Regulations, policy, they come second. But innovation always comes first. Am I right? Innovation always comes first, betul tak? Regulations come second, policies come second. If regulation and policies come first, there will be no such innovation. You cannot call that innovation because innovation should be coming first. So in this case, particularly in this case, if you are using ChatGPT, I know the students 99.9% probably use ChatGPT in writing essays. Okay, fine. So Pak John, dosen-dosen, Bu Dekan, coba tes. Karena saya juga dosen 10 tahun, saya tahu. Coba tes. You ask your students in class, 2 hours, 1 hour, you write essay. You can bring your own laptop, fine. But you write essay in the class. You can do it manually, writing, tulis-tulis, or you can do it on your laptop. Let's see how creative you can be. Yeah. This is a very good illustration on how you deal with technology. Yeah. Again, policies, regulation, they always come second, innovation comes first. And it is a matter of how you as educator, as lecturer, as regulator, as policy makers, you create something that would overcome technology. That's number one. And number two, if you're talking about how AI should be regulated, how AI should be exercised. In Indonesia, it is safe to say that our infrastructures, our digital infrastructures are still improving. We're not there yet, Pak. We are still maintaining and we are still building infrastructures for digital. But I think compared to other countries, at least in ASEAN, yeah, I would give you a specific case on crypto, yeah, crypto asset, because I was given also information by the officials that I can also talk about crypto. Crypto in Indonesia, yeah, they are considered as commodities, not as form of payment. So that's why it is regulated under the Ministry of Trade. And you know why? Because again, commodities are under the Ministry of Trade. And the transaction is high. I think it hit the peak in 2021. It hit the record 859 point something trillion rupiah. It's decreasing 2022, decreasing in 2023, and I think now in 2024 is increasing again. Why people, youth, younger generation, they are very open to this kind of transaction? Because they know that innovation and commodities that could coexist together can be utilized. That's why Ministry of Trade, we feel that it is very essential for us to regulate crypto as commodities, because we know that commodities such as crypto, digital commodities, can contribute a lot to our trade and economy. Now, this is a very good example on how regulators are adapting to the evolvement of technology. So I think some of you maybe already familiar of how crypto transaction or how crypto tokens or how crypto products are actually being used nowadays. So right now, I'm proud to say that Indonesia is the first country, the only country in the world, yeah, that has already launched an exchange for crypto. So if you want to do transactions, you want to do crypto transactions, you can just go to the exchange, to the crypto exchanger, and then you can do the transaction over there. It is the first in the world, and it was actually designed to accommodate how cryptomaniacs, how crypto lovers, how crypto enthusiasts are actually doing their activities. So these are two. First, the ChatGPT, second, the crypto, are actually just examples of how technology, how policies must coexist together. Then I think if you are talking about the use of technology in government, the use of technology in policymakers, for policymakers, I think we are still having a lot of homework, yeah, particularly government institutions. But at least we are trying to work hard on this one. We are trying to, let's say, formulate accurate policies on how technologies can be used. Yeah. So those are at least my explanations on how we should be coping with the improvement of technology. But again, Pak John, Ibu Dekan, and students, yeah, it's very entertaining, yeah, for us to know that technology is something that we should be focusing on right now in our education. So again, Bapak-Bapak dosen, Ibu-Ibu dosen, Bapak Ibu Dekan, please, Pak. As we know that technology is evolving, as we know that the use of technology in a lot of applications are actually being used by students, yeah, we have to prevail, Pak. And how do we prevail? We use something that they cannot think of a single way how to avoid doing your homeworks, how to, let's say, write essays using conventional ways. At least you know that as educator, as regulator, we must find some sort of way to do these kind of things. And last thing, the issue of standardization is very important. Again, on technology and on AI. I know we are talking a lot about ethical problems, ethical issues, how we should be addressing this kind of things. But my message is just only one. The issue of standardization among policymakers. Yeah. Sometimes the voice of developing countries like Indonesia, the voice of developed countries like those in the European Union, in the Western states, are not always the same. Yeah. If you want to raise a very objective policy on everything, not only on AI, not only on technology, you must find a very unbiased policy. And how you create unbiased policy, you must hear, you must listen to the voices from different perspectives, not only from one perspective. Yeah. I'm just giving you one example. This is a little bit off topic, but I was the head of delegation, Pak John, Ibu Dekan, on our palm oil back then in 2020. At the time, our CPO was being blocked by European Union, yeah, by EU, yeah, our CPO, right? So that's why we exercise our right. We sued the European Union in WTO, Pak John. We sue them. We are questioning their judgment. We are questioning their policy. Why you are blocking our CPO? As I was the head of delegation from the Ministry of Trade, we came to Geneva, and then we came to WTO, and then we are suing the European Union. We were having these debates, Pak John. We were having these arguments. And then they are asking, and then they are telling us, hey, Indonesia, your palm oil is dangerous, number one. Number two, we are doing a lot of deforestation act. And number three, your product is not healthy. Okay. Responding to this, I was talking to some high officials from the European Union, and I asked them, are you saying this based on accurate data? Okay, let's talk about deforestation. Yeah? This is why important we call about standardization. Let's talk about deforestation. I cannot say names, that country, that very country that is criticizing Indonesia for having a deforestation act. They are telling us that we are not preserving our forests good enough. And then I was responding to them, okay, let's take a look at the data. I would like to know how much your country is preserving your forests. And it turns out, Pak John, Bu Dekan, that very country is preserving their forest area less than 15%, whereas Indonesia preserving ours more than 51%. So it's very hypocritical, very hypocrite. You are telling us to maintain our forests, but at the same time, you are preserving less. Number one. Number two, it's not about how we are not pro-environment, it's about the price, teman-teman. You know, our CPO, yeah, is basically much more, no, their products like rapeseed, sunflower, they are much more expensive than our CPO, 5 times. So they are trying to find a way to block our CPO because they're trying to protect their local products. So it's not about the environment. And number three, Pak John, just now, at least a couple months ago, European Union just issued a deforestation act. So they are saying all products that are coming out of deforestation act cannot enter European market. I think it's a very good study nih buat anak-anak Fakultas Hukum. Is it right to do that? 7 commodities, including CPO and coffee. It's not only applicable to Indonesia, but all countries all over the world. Because they're afraid of their local products cannot compete with other products. This is the issue of standardization. So that's why I urge whenever I go to ASEAN meeting, ministerial meeting, I always say like this, ministers, let's work together, at least in the region, in Southeast Asia, so that we can somehow formalize a way, a very unbiased policy, so that we have good standardization on every single policy, such as environment, such as artificial intelligence, technology, everything. Because somehow, yeah, I apologize if there's some people here from the European Union, but I would like to say this bluntly, but somehow, yeah, their perspective are just not objective. This is the issue of standardization. So that's why, if you want to talk about artificial intelligence, how you use technology, how you use ethical problems as a moral reason or whatever, standardization is very important. So that's the next challenge of how we as educators, we as students, we as people cope with how technology and standardizations can synergize together. So probably, mungkin itu yang saya ingin sampaikan, Pak John, Bu Dekan, teman-teman, thank you. Forgive me, Pak John, I cannot stay for so long because I have to go to Bandung after this for another conference. Again, thank you for having me here. Pak John, Riyadi, Ibu Dekan, and Bapak Ibu sekalian, all pejabat from the campus, and all students. I'm sorry I won't be taking any questions because it's supposed to be a keynote address. And again, happy to be here and looking forward to another event, another invitation from the campus, from UPH, from Fakultas Hukum, and probably in the future from FISIP, yeah, and from other faculty. I hope that this conference can contribute a lot to our, not only to our policy makers, but also for students particularly, and for the community, and of course for UPH. Again, thank you very much. God bless us all.
Thank you, Pak Jerry, for the remarkable speech. Kindly remain on stage for an appreciation and documentation session. To lead us in expressing our gratitude, I would like to invite Ibu Feliana Tanaya, our Faculty Dean, on stage for the presentation of our appreciation to Pak Jerry. I would also like to invite Ms. Eunice Huang, Professor Christopher Marsden, as well as Pak John Riyadi on stage for a photo session. Thank you to our presenters for today. Following this interlude, we will reconvene for the first parallel panel session. The discussion for this session will be allocated to 4 different rooms, each dedicated to exploring distinct topics outlined in the accompanying slide. To facilitate a seamless transition, licensed officers have been assigned. These officers stand ready to guide and assist participants as they navigate from their coffee break to their preferred rooms. As we conclude our plenary session, we extend an invitation to all participants for a brief 15-minute coffee break. Coffee service is available. However, we kindly request students to remain for a few moments to complete a form pertaining to your SEP points. Please utilize the QR code displayed on the screen for convenient access to the form. Your cooperation in this matter is greatly appreciated. To students, please do not leave this room. Thank you.
Sorry. Cek. Sorry, selamat siang seluruh mahasiswa. Ada beberapa catatan yang ingin saya sampaikan kepada mahasiswa. Yang pertama adalah terkait dengan kedatangan daripada mahasiswa semua. Ini boleh duduk dulu, tadi udah disampaikan oleh MC bahwa khusus untuk mahasiswa disuruh stay dulu. Oke. Kita masih melangsungkan beberapa acara, mohon untuk partisipasinya secara aktif. Itu yang pertama. Yang kedua adalah, teman-teman seharusnya sudah tahu bagaimana tata cara mengikuti sebuah seminar, terutama ini adalah seminar internasional. Ini akan menjadi catatan bagi seluruh mahasiswa yang tadi beberapa melakukan gangguan terhadap presenter yang sedang berbicara. Jadi ini adalah peringatan kepada seluruh mahasiswa untuk bisa tertib, tenang, dan mengikuti segala rangkaian acara yang ada. Lalu yang ketiga terkait dengan absen, mohon untuk, saya ingatkan ya dari awal, bahwa absen hanya berlaku bagi yang hadir. Jadi jangan sampai teman-teman melakukan kecurangan dengan memfoto, lalu teman-temannya membagikan absen kepada teman yang tidak hadir. Jadi diingatkan kepada seluruh mahasiswa, ini peringatan, agar kita bisa berpartisipasi aktif di dalam seluruh rangkaian seminar. Lalu habis ini teman-teman akan break, yang mana nanti akan diarahkan oleh LO sekitar 10 sampai dengan 15 menit lagi. Mohon untuk diikuti seluruh arahan yang ada. Ini rangkaian acara yang ada bukan untuk Fakultas Hukum saja, tapi ini sudah dibuat rangkaian acaranya memang untuk teman-teman mahasiswa agar teman-teman tahu apa kira-kira yang menjadi topik pembahasan di dalam seminar kita di hari ini. Hari ini dan sampai dengan besok gitu ya. Jadi mohon untuk teman-teman sebisa mungkin ada kewajiban kan, ada beberapa yang kelas menjadi kewajiban, jadi untuk ditaati gitu ya. Lalu terkait dengan jam masuk itu juga menjadi catatan. Mohon untuk udah tahu kan jam masuknya jam berapa? Acaranya udah tahu kan? Ya, jadi mohon untuk diperhatikan jadwal rundown yang ada. Dan untuk keluar masuk toilet ini juga menjadi perhatian. Jadi setahu saya kalau kelas itu ke toilet paling ya 2 kali gitu ya. Tadi ada beberapa mahasiswa yang sampai 5 kali ke toilet. Saya nggak tahu lagi diare atau apa gitu ya. Jadi mohon untuk menjadi perhatian bersama. Saya rasa teman-teman mahasiswa yang ya mengerti lah beberapa catatan yang ada. Mohon untuk ditertibkan bersama. Terima kasih semuanya.
Mungkin kalau dari kalian yang mungkin tadi kurang paham sistemnya kayak gimana, nanti abis ini kalian coffee break, kalian tuh nggak akan balik ke ruangan ini, tapi kalian tuh akan dibagi ke 4 ruangan. Jadi nanti 4 ruangan ini akan dijalankan secara simultaneous, berbarengan, dan nanti topiknya tuh berbeda-beda dengan speakers yang berbeda-beda. Nah nanti kalian boleh pilih kalian mau ikut yang mana. Mungkin di PPT-nya nanti boleh di-share lagi tadi yang 4 parallel session itu. Yang tadi yang dibagi menjadi 4. Nah nanti kalian bisa lihat di sini terkait informasinya, terus kalian boleh pilih mau ikut yang mana. Terus nanti akan ada legal officer yang pandu kalian. Oke? Paham? Oke, thank you. Kalian boleh coffee break. Keluarnya jangan berisik ya, pelan-pelan aja. Mulutnya nggak usah terlalu berisik.